Hello, everyone. Rachel Weaver here. I am on faculty and staff at Lighthouse Writers Workshop. I've been putting together a series of videos called The Story of a Book, in which I ask authors to tell us the story of how their book or books came to be in the world. So today we have with us Dennis Mahoney. Thanks for being with us, Dennis.
Thanks for having me.
He has 3 books out, one very recent and 2 others. And I am going to turn it over to you, Dennis, and let you tell us about any or all of those books.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. So my new book, all 3 books that I put out are novels, and they're all over the place. The first one was a literary novel. The second one was a historical mystery adventure with some other elements of magic realism in it. It was a very difficult one to pin a genre to. And the new one is a ghost story. And a lot of the work I've been doing for the last few years has been almost entirely in the occult supernatural fiction zone. I found it was a great way. I found that the weirder my surface fiction got, the more honest I was able to be. It was one of those things where once the artifice expanded, I was able to talk more directly about depression without it being too on the nose, or about loneliness. It's one of those subjects that kind of any theme fits into an occult story in a way. And I think a lot of genre fiction works well that way. It maybe lowers your defenses a little bit, so you don't feel like somebody's preaching to you about death or loneliness or mental health. It looks like a crazy, entertaining story, and you're able to just sort of play with those themes a bit more. So after my second book came out, I was between major projects, and just to keep my writing arm in shape, I started blogging as a fictional character. And it was this guy, William Rook, and I just thought, he's living in a haunted house by himself, and I'll just do little daily reports a few times a week and see what happens. Mostly just to amuse myself. And the story began to emerge. He was in contact with some spirit in his house, and they were trying to figure out how to communicate, and I was trying to figure out what that would be like in the real world. Does a ghost have memories without a brain? Does a ghost wear clothes? If so, why? And I didn't know who the ghost was. And so as I was sort of learning with William who this person was and what the nature of the house was. Every time I sent him into a new room, I wasn't really sure what would be there. I was just kind of trying to entertain myself. So one day it's snowing in the dining room, and another day he finds a 100-pound centipede is living in the home. And it was just exploring all those stories. And at a certain point, I realized they were falling in love, and that was an interesting relationship. Accidentally wrote a kind of quarantine book 2 years ago, because my wife brought this up about a month ago. It's 2 characters who never leave home developing a touchless relationship while talking about mortality and death and loneliness. And it's an extremely tiny little piece. I mean, it's a little chamber piece. It's pretty much 2 characters, and they never go out of the house. So like a long novella in a way. I mean, it has a very tight focus. It was a lot of fun to write. That was one thing I learned at a certain point in my failure years, or in my apprentice years, as I was writing books and getting closer and closer to getting an agent, or in some cases getting an agent and not selling the book. I realized that if you don't like writing on a regular basis, if you're not basically getting something out of the daily work, it's just insane to do this as a job. Even if a book comes out and it does really well, it kind of comes and goes. It's not that fast. You really have to sort of like the other 24 months of the job. When you're in relative obscurity, or you're just writing in privacy, it's Tuesday and you've got to crank out 1,000 words by the end of the day, or whatever goal. So that's been good. I would say the last 3 books I wrote primarily because I wanted to. And, it took me way too long to get to that point of view. I was always trying to write, the kind of book an agent would like, or the kind of book that might get reviewed. And boy, it's just not worth it. So,
Yeah.
And then there's a whole extra story in the bizarre publishing cycle of Ghostlove I can get into as well. But did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that this comes up all the time in this video series. This idea, like the shift that seems to happen from the focus on the product to the focus on the process, right? Yeah. I think when we all start writing, we all think, well, I'm doing this so that I end up with this product, right? And that all the satisfaction, or maybe not all, but like a big piece of the satisfaction is going to come from the product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas eventually it seems like almost everyone gets to the point of, oh, well, yeah, there's this product, but it's the process that is actually fueling.
Right.
And it sounds like you're saying the same thing.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's easy for me to say now that I've had a book published. It was late, you know, and I kind of dilly-dallied in my 20s. I mean, I was doing a lot of like short form web writing. This was, you know, I'm 45, so this was the early days of blogging. I was probably second wave blogger, when blogs were still important. I mean, even that is dating me. What was I, 33, I think, by the time the first book was accepted by FSG and published. And it took me almost, I want to say about a year before I really stopped feeling anxiety whenever I thought about my writing career. There was always a combination of like hope and enthusiasm and optimism, and then also a real underpinning of dread. And am I kidding myself? And my God, I'm 33. Am I going to be 73 and not have a book published?
Right.
Once you get that first one in, it suddenly, it starts to feel a little more real. It's definitely a huge confidence builder, even if the book isn't a smash. And I think even finishing a book and getting it out and getting any kind of attention from an agent, even if they don't take it, it is validating. And I had those little micro steps along the way that kept me going.
Yeah,
You know,
and
a couple of very big agents almost represented me, and it was that kind of thing where you couldn't tell anybody that because it's still a failure. It's not a failure, but you know, it's not like I have a book deal. But I just thought like somebody actually read the thing, and that feels really great.
Yeah. I mean, I think so much of it is a head game, right? I mean, once you sort of get your head straight around the process, or just the path, I guess, of creating and working on books for years and years, then everything begins to shift, right? The other thing I was interested in what you said so far is this idea of discovery through writing. A lot of times, myself included, we think, well, I need to plan it all out, right? Like I need to have a good sense of what's going on and what's going to happen in this book. And I think it has something to do with trying to like make the process more efficient. So I like that you are bringing up the opposite of that, which is you just start writing about, you know, this guy, and then, whoa, there's a ghost, and whoa, they're in love, right?
Right.
I think that's fascinating. And I think it sounds very freeing.
It can be. I've done it all different ways. The second book I wrote was so weird and complicated. Multiple timelines, multiple characters, multiple continents. That one I spent an incredible amount of time plotting it before I actually really started to quote unquote write it. But the plot I ended up with was something like 80 pages long. So it was almost like a crappily written version of the novel. But I mean, I was telling myself the story.
Yeah.
I found that very liberating because you can take wild chances without obsessing over the poetry of a paragraph or something.
Right.
If I didn't like the giant thrown together chapter that I put, down last week, it didn't hurt to get rid of it and start over just because it was just an elaborate note to myself.
Right.
It's like when you're writing an email to a friend and you realize like it's so easy to write 500 words in 20 minutes. But if you're writing fiction, it might take you a day to do that long. And it's like, it's the process of writing isn't that slow. As long as you can go. So sometimes with plotting, I'm much more adventurous and the story will unfold organically that way. Instead of literally writing it. I mean, Ghostlove ended up being something different, but then I just went through a process. I don't know if you can see behind me.
Yeah.
I'm index carding a whole audio novella. I felt like I needed to work it out in order to have the confidence to then sit down and work on the craft where, I know what's going to happen. Now I want to do it well.
Yeah. So it sounds like, it sounds a little bit like what you're saying is that the different different books, like different stories are sort of requesting a different process for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's funny. Sometimes I wonder if it's just trying something that I didn't do last time.
Right.
I've noticed like my Fellow Mortals, the first novel, it was primarily a male character, a couple of male characters. And there were key female characters in it, but it was really focused on Henry and Sam. It's been a while, I'm actually forgetting character names. The book after that, I needed to write a female character. Like I just didn't want to spend time with the men anymore. And so it's very centered around Molly. Ghostlove, I went to a male character. I tend to flip-flop like that. So I think sometimes when I really plot something, the next time I'll kind of wing it. And then maybe the next time, just to change it up, I'll try plotting it again. Or, you know, this time I did it with index cards. I've never done that before. You know, sometimes it's a color-coded Word document, or you know, whatever idiotic process I start using ends up being the one. I think you're right. It almost dictates itself. Mm-hmm. Somehow I wrote 200 draft pages, I think, of Bellwether. Like the second half of the book, I wrote longhand because I was getting really jammed up on the computer. And dictation software was horrible back then, so I ended up reading it into my phone because I'm a terrible touch typer. So I literally used Siri on my phone and then carried it over to Word, and it was a ridiculous, awkward process, but it worked for me at the time.
Yeah. I'm interested too. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about writing for Audible. If that's a different process for you, or because Ghostlove came out as an Audible book first and then was picked up by IG Publishing to come out in paperback, correct?
Yes. Ghostlove is weird. I had an agent at the time for my second book, and he just, when I finished writing Ghostlove as a novel, he didn't connect with it. And so suddenly I was, you know, free floating. And I just didn't really feel like going through the agent hunt again. Like it felt like a step back. And so I thought, well, heck with it. Like most of my artist heroes are indie in one form or another. Yeah. So I decided to do an indie podcast of Ghostlove. And I had a partner, and we broke it into, I don't know, 13 episodes and put it out into the world. And then once it had been out for about 5 months, I thought, well, at this point I can try an agent and see if they're interested. You know, I did it my way. I did find an agent who was interested, and she brought it to Steve and Audible, and Audible wanted to re-record it. So we took down the indie version and they put up a professionally recorded version.
Wow.
So that one wasn't written for audio. It ended up working well that way because it's almost entirely one character in first person. So it sounds like somebody telling a story. The one I'm writing now, you know, that I'm going to pitch to them, it's not like it's been accepted, but this one is the first one I've written intentionally thinking it's going to be audio somehow. So it's 2 characters. It's a bit more back and forth. There's a sense of trying to play a little bit with the fact that it is audio and not on the page. So a little more dialogue driven, or a little more, it feels like somebody's telling you a story, and it feels like it ought to be spoken.
Yeah. So before we call it good, do you have any advice for people who might be a little bit lost in that land of, is anyone ever going to read this book? Am I ever going to finish this book? Am I ever going to get an agent? Am I ever going to, you know, put it out on my own? And will anyone read it if I do it that way? It sounds like you've worked very hard and for a long time to get to where you are. So I wonder if you have any advice for anyone who's a little bit, you know, earlier on the path.
Right. I mean, definitely try, like I said earlier, try to find a way to like the work. But that's not to say you shouldn't be paying attention to the goal. I mean, it's great to have the goal of trying to get published. I would say when I finally started submitting to the agents, I had almost no writing credits to speak of, like nothing terribly impressive. It's not like I had a short story in the New Yorker. I had no real calling card. And what I did realize is that most agents, I mean, they get something like 1,000 or 2,000 queries a month. And that was the last I heard. You know, it might be even more now. They really are dying to hear a good pitch. And if you can write the equivalent of good jacket copy, and it's honestly a description of your book, they really do want to take a look at the first chapter. They want to take a look at a bit of it. Like, I don't think you need to know somebody, and I don't think you need to have a super impressive resume. If you've written a good book, there are people who actually want it. You know, agents don't make a ton of money either. It's not, there's that whole cliche where agents are the money grubbing part of the business. Editors even worse. You know, they're in it for the love of this thing. Everyone I ever met really was. I don't know, keep writing. The one thing I hear over and over again and from writers I admire is that having some kind of daily routine really matters. So you got to sit down at some regular hour and do it on a regular basis, even if the writing stinks that day. It'll just never come if you're not sitting down at the computer or the comp notebook or whatever it is you're going to do.
Well, thanks for talking with us today, Dennis. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We'll see you later.
All right.